Cold rain poured from the dark evening sky as Ethan Carter stepped off the old city bus with a worn backpack hanging from his shoulder. His shoes splashed through muddy puddles while icy wind pushed against him, but he kept walking toward the abandoned garage at the end of the street. The building looked almost haunted. Rust covered the metal shutters. Several windows were broken, and weeds had grown so tall around the walls that they nearly blocked the entrance. Most people passing by called it useless junk, a dead property waiting to collapse. But when Ethan looked at it, he didn't see ruin. He saw possibility. For years, Ethan had struggled to survive after losing both his father and the small family repair shop they once owned. Since then, he worked every job he could find, repairing bicycles, fixing broken lawnmowers, cleaning warehouses, and sometimes sleeping hungry just to save money. Every dollar he earned was hidden carefully inside a tiny metal box beneath his bed in a cramped rented room. While others spent money on comfort, Ethan spent nights studying engine repairs and business videos online, dreaming that one day he would own a workshop of his own. When he heard that billionaire CEO Richard Langston wanted to get rid of this worthless garage, Ethan gathered every penny he had and requested a meeting. Standing inside the leaking building that evening, Ethan watched rainwater drip through holes in the ceiling onto the cracked concrete floor. Old tires, rusted tools, and broken shelves were scattered everywhere. Even the single hanging light bulb flickered like it was ready to die. Richard Langston walked in wearing an expensive black coat, looking disgusted by the place. "Kid, nobody wants this dump," the CEO said with a small laugh. "Why would you waste your money here?" Ethan slowly looked around the garage before answering. "Because everyone else sees what it is now," he said quietly. "I see what it could become." Richard stared at him for a moment, surprised by the confidence in his voice. Then the billionaire pulled out a contract and smirked. $1,000. "That's the only reason I'm selling it this cheap." Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he handed over the envelope, containing every dollar he owned. The moment the papers were signed, Richard left without another word. Alone in the dark garage, Ethan stood silently while thunder echoed outside. He had no savings left, no backup plan, and no guarantee of success. But as he looked around the broken building, a determined smile slowly appeared on his face. That night, while the storm raged outside, Ethan picked up an old broom and began cleaning the garage that everyone else had already given up on. The first few weeks inside the garage were harder than Ethan had imagined. Every morning he woke up on a thin mattress placed beside an old workbench, his back aching from the cold concrete floor beneath him. The roof still leaked whenever it rained, so he kept buckets scattered around the garage to catch the dripping water. Some nights the electricity failed completely, forcing him to work under a small battery-powered lamp until sunrise. But Ethan refused to quit. He cleaned every corner of the garage with his own hands, repaired broken shelves, painted the rusted walls, and organized the old tools people had abandoned years ago. Since he had no money left after buying the property, he collected scrap metal and second-hand equipment from junkyards across town. People laughed whenever they saw him dragging old machine parts through the streets. "That garage will never survive," some said. Others mocked him openly. "You bought a pile of trash, not a business." Ethan heard every insult, but instead of getting angry, he worked even harder. During the day, he repaired bicycles, scooters, and small engines for cheap prices just to keep the lights on. At night, he watched online tutorials about welding, engine rebuilding, marketing, and custom car design. He barely slept more than 3 hours a night. One evening, while Ethan was closing the garage, a tired delivery driver arrived, pushing a badly damaged motorcycle. The man explained that every repair shop in town had demanded more money than he could afford. Ethan looked carefully at the broken engine and quietly said, "Leave it with me." The repair took the entire night. Oil covered Ethan's hands, sweat dripped from his forehead, and exhaustion burned in his eyes. But by sunrise, the motorcycle engine roared back to life, stronger than before. The delivery driver was shocked, grateful and emotional. He recorded a short video praising Ethan's work and uploaded it online. Within days, thousands of people watched the clip. Suddenly, customers started arriving from nearby towns, bringing damaged bikes, cars, and engines for Ethan to restore. For the first time, the garage no longer felt empty. The sound of tools, engines, and customers filled the building every day. Ethan used his first profits to create a bold metal sign above the entrance that read, Carter Customs. Standing outside the garage one evening, Ethan stared proudly at the glowing sign while city lights flickered in the distance. 6 months earlier, people saw this place as worthless junk. Now, little by little, it was becoming the foundation of something much bigger than anyone had imagined. 6 months. After selling the old garage, billionaire CEO Richard Langston happened to drive through the same industrial district on his way to a business meeting. Rain clouds hung low over the city as his black luxury car moved slowly through the crowded streets. Richard barely paid attention to the area because, in his mind, it was full of forgotten buildings and failed businesses. But as his driver turned the corner near the old garage property, Richard suddenly leaned forward in shock. Bright lights illuminated the street. Crowds of people stood outside with cameras and smartphones, and expensive sports cars lined the road one after another. Loud music played from inside a massive, modern workshop where mechanics moved quickly between customized vehicles painted in stunning colors. Richard frowned in confusion. "Stop the car," he ordered immediately. As he stepped outside, he looked up at the giant metal sign glowing above the entrance, Carter Customs. For a moment, he could hardly believe this was the same broken garage he had sold for only $1,000. The rusty walls were gone, replaced by sleek black panels and large glass windows. The cracked parking lot had become a polished showroom, filled with luxury cars worth millions. Customers, influencers, and reporters crowded around the building while employees in matching uniforms worked confidently inside. Richard slowly walked through the entrance, stunned by the transformation. In the center of the workshop stood Ethan Carter, calmly discussing a custom engine build with clients. He looked completely different now, confident, focused, and respected by everyone around him. When Ethan noticed Richard standing nearby, he smiled politely and walked over. "Mr. Langston," Ethan said warmly, extending his hand. "I didn't expect to see you here." Richard shook his hand slowly, still staring around the enormous garage. This used to be a dump," he muttered in disbelief. Ethan glanced around proudly. "Most people only saw the mess," he replied. "I saw potential." Richard walked deeper into the shop while mechanics lifted expensive vehicles onto hydraulic platforms and cameras filmed restoration projects for social media. Everywhere he looked, business was booming. "How many customers do you even have now?" Richard asked. Ethan smiled slightly. "More than we can handle sometimes." The billionaire stopped beside a fully restored, luxury sports car worth more than the entire property once cost. He shook his head slowly and laughed under his breath. "I sold you junk," he admitted. Ethan looked directly at him and replied calmly, "No, sir. You sold me a chance nobody else believed in." For the first time in years, Richard Langston felt genuine respect for someone who had started with almost nothing and turned a forgotten garage into a growing empire. 1 year after buying the abandoned garage, Ethan Carter stood inside the headquarters of Carter Customs, staring through the massive glass windows overlooking a facility larger than he had ever imagined possible. Hundreds of employees moved across the enormous building while machines hummed, engines roared, and sparks flew from custom workshops. Luxury cars from around the world filled the showroom floor, each one carrying the signature style that had made Carter Customs famous online. What had started as a leaking garage with broken shelves and rusted tools had now become one of the fastest-growing automotive brands in the country. Social media influencers, celebrities, athletes, and wealthy collectors waited months just to have Ethan's team customize their vehicles. News channels called him the Garage King, but Ethan never let fame change him. He still arrived before sunrise every morning, walking through the workshop to greet every employee personally. Many of those workers had once been ignored by society, young people without opportunities, former factory workers who had lost their jobs, and struggling mechanics nobody believed in. Ethan gave them chances because he understood exactly how it felt to be overlooked. Instead of building a life filled with luxury and arrogance, he invested his profits into training centers and free, mechanical programs for poor students who dreamed of learning a skill. One afternoon, Richard Langston arrived at the headquarters again. But this visit felt very different from the first time. Instead of wearing his cold business expression, the billionaire walked through the building with admiration in his eyes. Large digital screens displayed Carter Customs, projects from different countries, while workers rushed between departments with energy and excitement. Richard stopped beside Ethan near the center of the factory floor and quietly said, "I've spent my entire life building companies, but I've never seen growth like this." Ethan smiled humbly. "It didn't happen overnight," he replied. "There were nights I wanted to give up." Richard nodded, slowly as he looked around the empire that once began as a forgotten garage. "You know," the billionaire admitted, "when I sold you that place, I thought I was getting rid of useless property." Ethan laughed softly. "And now?" Richard looked directly at him before answering. "Now I realize I wasn't selling a garage. I was handing an opportunity to someone brave enough to see value where everyone else saw failure." Outside the headquarters stood a giant silver sign reading Carter Empire. Beneath it, engraved into black stone, were words Ethan would never remove, "Built from junk." Every employee who walked through those doors understood the meaning behind that sentence, that dreams do not depend on where you start, but on how hard you are willing to fight for them.